Speaker, Ms. Kissling, Ms. Rose, members of the body, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and welcome to the Yale Political Union, the nation's oldest and largest society for collegiate debate, the activity at the heart of our organization. An activity that we cherish and enjoy, an outlet for creative expression, an enterprise taken up alongside friends, a pastime. Last week, in the hours following tragedy, I found myself thinking a lot about this activity called debate and about what we do. I'm sure many of you joined me in this reflection, as well as in feeling horrified at such a display of political violence. It is not lost on me that the evening prior, the majority of our attendees at the debate with Mr. King voted against the resolution that violence is never the answer. I know that everyone who voted for either side had their own reasons and did not name that's it like, but the vote was nevertheless for me an invocation to better understand the sentiments of our body. It is not my or the speaker's role to comment upon our members' opinion on any topic. That's what our debates are for. I am moved to say, however, and I believe that our members will join me in saying, that what happened last week is the antithesis of this organization's sacred enterprise. The activity that we love, our outlet, our pastime, debate, is predicated on the belief that it is only through the exchange of ideas, through speech and response, through spirited but civil deliberation, that we can arrive at any common ideal, and we can avoid circumstances in which any individual can find a way to justify violence. That evening, I contacted our security liaison to ask whether we would have to reconsider the semester ahead. His response was flatly no. We will not allow this to stop the free exchange of ideas at Yale. We will not stop the debates, no matter the fact that new precautions and protections will be required. The next morning, I received word from both Ms. Kissling and Ms. Rose's team, confirming their attendance at our debate. Our speakers were moved not into silence, but into speech. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what it is all about. That is the common ground on which we stand. And so I say, members and friends, if you need anything in the weeks ahead or somebody to talk to about anything on your mind, our leadership is always here to support. Thank you. And with that said, at this evening's debate, we are blessed to be joined by two esteemed guests to discuss our resolution. Frances Kissling has spent a lifetime as an activist in the movements for women's rights, the right to abortion, and religious freedom. Born in Queens, New York City, educated as a Catholic schoolgirl and as an undergraduate at the New School, Ms. Kissling began her career as the founding president of the National Abortion Federation. In 1978, she joined the board for Catholics for a Free Choice, an organization which she then led as president for 25 years. She is the author of Rosie, The Investigation of a Wrongful Death, among several other books, and is currently president of the Center for Health, Ethics, and Social Policy. Those of us who were with us for the dinner also learned that Ms. Kissling is currently the subject of a one-woman play being written called Frances Kissling, Cardinal for Choice. Raised and homeschooled alongside 7 siblings in San Jose, California, Lila Rose is one of the leading anti-abortion and conservative activists in the country. At 15 years old, before attending UCLA, she founded Live Action, a nonprofit organization dedicated to investigating the reality of abortion in America, and she has since addressed audiences like ours across the country, including at the White House. Her work has inspired legislative action at state and federal levels, and she was even featured in an Atlantic documentary entitled Meet the Face of the Millennial Anti-Abortion Movement. So we have artists on both sides tonight. Ladies, we welcome you to the Yale Political Union. I would be remiss if I did not mention that the joint debate tonight would not have happened without the help of the David Network, of the Leadership Institute, of the student leaders of Choose Life at Yale, and of the Federalist Party. Thank you for your support of our enterprise. The order for debate tonight, as we have 2 guests, is a little bit different. We will begin with Ms. Kissling's address, followed by student questions. We will then have Ms. Rose's address, followed by student questions. Then we will have a 5-minute opportunity for Ms. Kissling to ask Ms. Rose questions herself. Then 5 minutes of the opposite. 4 consecutive student speeches, each with time after for questions, Ms. Rose's closing remarks, and then Ms. Kissling's closing remarks, after which we will vote. Members of the union and aspiring members, after the 3N, I encourage you to sign out, as well as to sign in digitally for the Leadership Institute. After dinner, it is likely, I think, given the presence of our diners tonight, that Ms. Rose and Ms. Kissling think that Yale is about 75% Catholic. I was sure not to tell them otherwise. We have a spirited debate ahead of us, folks. As at all of our debates, we ask that you put away your technology, refrain from all recording, and of course, to tap when you agree and hiss when you don't. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move the Yale Political Union debate, Choice Over Life, with Frances Kissling and Lila Rose.
It is so moved.
Okay, I'm Miss Kissling, better known as the Cardinal of Choice, not Fortune. At any rate, I wanted to come out and step up and do this here because I love my shoes. You can't see my shoes. You can't know who I am if you do not love my shoes. The amount of time we have is I want to help you work with you around how you think about abortion. I've been doing this since 1970, and I have found very little differences in the way in which the conversations around abortion take place. We have people who on one side of the debate believe that the fetus has a leader and that abortion is not harmful. We have people who are pro-choice, pro-lifers, pro-choice, who believe often that women have a right to decide what to do once they are pregnant. And the reality is that for all, I forgot to put my mic on. Ooh, how terrible. Should I put my mic on or should I use this? Whatever I want. Here, take this. I prefer everybody taking time with my precious time. Can you get this to work? Beautiful. Okay, so, and the outcome of these two polar opposites is almost never conversation. it never changes anybody's mind as far as I can see. People who came in with the idea that abortion is wrong in all circumstances, a sin, whatever they want to call it, and that women have a near unrestricted right to decide whether to continue a pregnancy or not, pretty much leave in the same place that they were. This has been going on for a long time, and I hope that I don't bore you tonight by repeating the same arguments that are consistently made by people on my side of this issue and people on the other side of the issue. So in my journey, and my journey includes participating in abortions, for the first 3 years, 1970 to 1973, I ran an abortion clinic. I ran an abortion organization, and I engaged in politics. And then I became a Catholic for a free choice. Okay. I don't use the term choice generally in my work because choices are about butter and margarine. What we're interested in is matters of life and death. We are interested in very serious, complex moral decisions. And I've come to the conclusion, having done work on both sides of this question, with people of very different stripes in countries all over the world, that we need to begin to think about abortion as a conflict of values. Okay. I tend to favor more or think more about the value of women's lives. And when I say lives, I'm not talking about whether they're going to die or not. I'm talking about the fact that they have a life, they have decisions to make about how they are going to live that life, they have illnesses and they have health, they have children, they have husbands, they have partners, and they think. And that value becomes especially important if and when they become pregnant, particularly when they didn't intend to become pregnancy at that point in time. They have big decisions to make, and no one really can say the only decision they can make is to carry the pregnancy to term, whatever it means for them and their life, or the best decision they can make is to exercise their right to end the pregnancy. That doesn't go anywhere. And so what we don't have is a discourse that allows those two values to come forward and for women to have the opportunities to think and their partners and their friends and their mothers and their other children to think about what is the best thing for me to do in the decision I face. And that it's not the person who says to them, you have to have an abortion. You're not going to be able to graduate from university if you don't have an abortion. Or, oh my God, you have to carry this baby to term because the baby is precious and it is the best thing for that pregnancy to continue. And tells them that they're wrong. They're wrong. Not continuing a pregnancy is a bad thing, they're told. You will regret it. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But it's up to them to decide whether they will or they won't. Now, my background, in terms of all of this, may be a bit strange to hear someone speak this way, because I am a Catholic. I grew up in Catholic schools through the first 2 years of university. I entered a convent, a nun, and I decided it wasn't for me, and I left. And I am an ardent advocate of intelligent, well-read Catholicism. You know, the idea that Catholicism never changes is not true. Even in very serious decisions, like I was thinking about this. Whatever happened to limbo? Anybody ever hear of limbo? They say limbo used to be a teaching of the church. And limbo was created because the leaders of the church, first limbo was created because the leaders of the church had to think about, well, what are we going to do with good people who don't happen to get baptized? Where are they going to go? I mean, what we tell them is they have to be baptized in, what we used to tell them is they have to be baptized in order to go to heaven. Oh, I got it, said one priest. I got it. We're going to create another place, limbo. And that's where they're going to go. They're not going to be unhappy. They're not going to burn, but they're never going to see God. That's limbo. And then, somewhere in the last 40 years, the church fathers, and they're all fathers, decided, oh no, we got to get rid of this limbo thing. Limbo does not exist. And so now we have no limbo. Our parents and grandparents remember limbo. But most of us, when we hear the word limbo, we think of dancing and getting under that rope. So even a religion that is considered by many one of the most developed theologically, with lots of rules, but lots of wisdom and lots of ideas, has changed over time. And I'm in that group of Catholics who look at the idea that a church can change, even the Catholic Church can change. We learn new things. We didn't learn much of the science we're living with today. We didn't know it all. We didn't have a theology of animals. Now we have a theology of animals. We weren't worried about climate. Now we're worried about climate. We're worried about trees. We're worried about life in a much bigger sense than we were a long time ago. And people who were gay, lesbian, transgendered were in the closet. And now they're among us. Openly, we hope, among us. How are we going to deal with that? Okay. So those are things that are on my mind every day. And they're things I have to think about in my work. And I have to think about this business, that abortion is not just a right. Abortion is an important reproductive act. And what we're about is reproduction. This is not just about abortion. This is about the decision of whether to have a child, and when to have a child, and when not to have a child. This is a decision about how many children can you care for and love. That's another part of that decision. That's a decision about whether you're going to have a baby or you're going to end a pregnancy. You are going to terminate a pregnancy. You are going to end the developing life of what would emerge as a new person. Those are the questions that every woman who gets pregnant, not every woman, because some women know exactly what they're going to do, and they are very happy with what they're going to do, but where most of us have to think about what is the right thing to do. And the answer to the question, and the question, what is the right thing to do, is the most important question we face as people. We face it in so many ways. What is the right thing to do about poor people? What is the right thing to do about how we spend our money and how much of it we give to others who have more need than us? What is the right thing to do about how much meat you're going to eat? Those are comparable questions to the questions of what you're going to do about a pregnancy. And you also find now that we are thinking about things like how many people, when I was younger and growing up, the question was, the answer was too many people in the world. How many people are there? And we have to stop having as many babies. And now the question that is being raised consistently, and very often by my colleagues and friends on the conservative side, who think, great, what's happening is there are too few people. This is going to be wonderful. Women are going to have more babies. Yes, there's going to be bigger and greater families. And the whole question of population gets reduced to the question of whether women are going to have babies for us or not have babies for us. And the interesting thing when I think about the population question and how it used to be that we had to have more kids, and also as population rates grew in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, we people better start catching up and have more babies too. All of those things came up. Many of them had unfortunate roots that were not really aimed at creating a better world for everybody, but were aimed at creating a better world for the few. And it didn't matter whether the question was too many people or too few people. The interests were not of poor people. The interests were of those who had the most. And that's what we're dealing with when we deal with the question of whether to have babies or not have babies at the very personal level of a woman who is considering getting pregnant or who is pregnant and not sure what to do about it. And remember, whether the question was too many people 75 years ago, and the question today is too few people, the answer is always the same. One answer comes from the right, and the other answer comes from the left. And the answer is that women are the object of solving this problem. We don't hear very much about the tree people. We don't hear very much about cutting down the forest. We don't hear very much about men. What we hear is women. Women are going to solve the problem by having babies, even if they don't want them, or not being allowed to have babies. Those are the points that we are dealing with now. We are not just dealing with one question for one value, one moral value. We are, and I'm going back to the beginning of my remark, we are going back to the problem of complicated ethical questions that do not have a single answer, that require thinking. And I think those of you here at Yale have probably thought about the fact of how much critical thinking happens. You know, I'm sure here critical thinking is going on all the time. But people are not thinking critically about issues. And people who are in charge of NGOs, advocacy organizations, and government have no interest in assisting you to think critically. They want to give you slogans about what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and underneath it all, the same ideas are going on. Not new ideas, the same ideas coming from the same places. And what I do now, I've actually spent most of my time meeting with groups, small groups of people, half of whom are pro-choice and half of whom are pro-life, in very structured environments where nobody gets to preach and where questions are more valued than answers.
And if there's one thing we need now, it's a lot of questions. Because things are in pretty bad shape. Now, I was going to get a signal that my 5 minutes were up. Am I about there? Because I want to end. Okay. And here's how I want to end. You know, I want to talk to the men that are in the room. All of you, every one of you, I want to talk to you, and I want to get answers from you. You know, there is some truth to the conversation and the values and the idea in reproduction of the gift of life. Wow. The gift of life. When you really get right down to it, when a woman becomes pregnant and she continues the pregnancy and she delivers a baby and it all goes pretty well, because I'm certainly not going to be Pollyannish and tell you that every pregnancy, every delivery, and every child turned back just the way you want it. Okay? There are bad things happen. But for the most part, in most countries, having a child is a wonderful thing. It's great to have a child. It is just great. And you know something? You guys can't do it. You can't do it. And the fact that you have not been able to do it for a very long time, forever, okay, unless you change your gender, and then even then it's a little hard. But at any rate, the fact of the matter is that you still can't do it. And I have sort of a psychological mind, and a philosophical psychological mind, and my psychological mind says, this thing about men not being able to do it is a problem. This is a problem because there's a lot of jealousy. Okay, now, but maybe there's not so much jealousy. And this is what I want to ask you, Guy. I want to ask you, and I ask this question all over the world, Mozambique, Bangkok, Thailand, everywhere I go, I ask this question in groups that I work with. And here's the question. Since having the ability to give gift of life is really hot, how many of you, guys, this is where you're going to raise your hand or not, how many of you would like to be able to be pregnant? And I'll tell you the answers I get, but first you have to raise that hand. How many men would like to do what we women do all the time? And you know it's beautiful. It is so beautiful. When that baby comes out, oh, wow, that is something wonderful. I'm giving you a little time because I see you're thinking about this or trying to decide whether you're going to put your hand up or not. But now is the moment. How many of you men, you're a man? Okay. I mean, you could be. I'm not prejudiced about anything. You could be a guy. You could be a guy. I don't know. But now, once again, how many men want to get pregnant and bring the gift of life into the world? Hands up.
If God designed it so.
Oh, get a cop out. Okay, anybody else? Any other guy here? Do we have a guy back there? You want, okay, one guy. This one still is planning on having a baby. Okay, all right. So now what I want to tell you about that experiment, well, before I do that, I want to talk to the men, which means all of you, who don't want to have a baby? Why don't you want to have a baby? It's the most wonderful thing you can do in the world. Bring a new person into the world. What's wrong with you? Why don't you want to have a baby? Come on, somebody, fess up. Yeah, why don't you want to have a baby? Loud. Loud. It hurts. It hurts. What else? What else? Any other reason? Yes.
I don't believe I will get such that.
Ah, that's very interesting. I like that answer. Yes, very good. Anybody else? Tell me why you don't want to do this. I mean, do you agree with me that giving the gifts of life is real undone? Okay. Okay. I was hearing that noise, and I didn't know what it was. I don't know. All right, I'm gonna let it go at that, but I'm gonna tell you, every country I have asked this questionnaire, and it's now a stock part of my portfolio. There have never been more than 2 men there's never been more than 2 men. There are only 2 men in hundreds of workshops that have said that they want to have a baby. One was a Muslim guy, young Muslim guy, really sweetie. I just liked him so much. And he just thought this would be, and I'm going to finish as soon as I say the other one. He just thought it would be nice. He was a sweetie. He was a sweetie. I love sweetie. And the other one, now what did he say? He was a Frenchman working in Mozambique. His wife had a number of very difficult pregnancies. And he said, I would like to have a baby in solidarity with my wife. Thank you very much.
And with that, this is perhaps a first talking speech in the night.
Thank you, Ms. Kissling. Thank you so much for hosting this wonderful debate to all the students here at Yale. It's truly an honor. I want you to think back with me a few weeks ago. There was a news story in Lexington, Kentucky. The police received a call about a newborn child. When they entered the home, they discovered a baby boy. He was dead. He was wrapped in a towel. He was stuffed in a black trash bag and hidden in a closet. His mother, a 21-year-old college student, admitted that she had given birth and then tried to erase every trace of him. She has been charged with abuse of a corpse, tampering with evidence, and concealing the birth of a child. This little boy's life ended in the dark, discarded like trash, as if he had no worth at all. The coroner confirmed that he was a boy, and his cause of death is still under investigation. But whether he died at birth or just after, he was not just a pregnancy, not just a fetus. He was a son. Some call it only pregnancy loss. Others insisted that he not be referred to as a baby. Why? Because they fear the truth. To name him is to admit his shared humanity. A child was hidden in a closet, his humanity denied. If this does not grieve us, then what will? This is what choice over life looks like. When choice of adults is made supreme, not of the children, life of children of the vulnerable become disposable. What about the child's choice? That has not been represented here yet tonight. And so let me ask the question here plainly. Should murder be legal? Should murder be legal? Of course not. Then why do we excuse abortion? Abortion is the direct and intentional killing of an innocent human being. It is not an accident. It is the direct and intentional killing of an innocent human being. That is the reality behind euphemisms like choice and healthcare. What does abortion actually do? Abortion procedures tear babies limb from limb, in suction abortions. In the abortion pill abortion, it starves a child to death with drugs. In later term abortions, it pierces a needle into the beating heart or the brain of a living, developing child. These are not acts of healing. These are acts of killing. Every day in this country, nearly 3,000 children meet their fate by abortion. That is nearly the number of lives lost on 9/11, repeated every single day. The case against abortion is simple. It is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Who here agrees? It is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. I hope my esteemed debate partner would also agree with this, that it is always wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Therefore, abortion is always wrong, and it must be illegal because the baby has value and deserves a choice, the ability to live. There are only two arguments typically used to justify abortion. We're going to categorize them, and some of them were touched on by Ms. Kissling. First of all, there is an argument made that the entity in the womb is somehow not a human being, that they're lesser than us here in this room, which I believe is definitively science denial. We'll talk about this more in a minute. Number two, the other category of argument for the killing of abortion is that sometimes it is okay. Sometimes it is okay to kill innocent human beings. There are some justifications for it, and we will examine those as well. My esteemed opponent today, Ms. Kissling, wrote this in the Washington Post in 2011. She writes, "We can no longer pretend the fetus is invisible. We must end the fiction that an abortion at 26 weeks is no different from one at 6 weeks. We need to firmly and clearly reject post-viability abortions except in extreme cases." That is wrong. The baby at 6 weeks is just as valuable as the baby at 26 weeks, or the toddler at 2 years old, or the adult at 26 years old. Any other lines that we may draw are arbitrary and inherently dehumanizing. Justice demands consistency. Killing preborn children must be illegal for the same reasons that killing born children, a newborn, must be illegal. Because our human value, our worth, is not based on our size, on our age, on our level of development, or on our location or dependency. The 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868, declares, quote, "No state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property, nor deny any person equal protection of the laws." The promise is clear, and it was meant for every human. At the time of ratification, 3/4 of the states had laws against abortion at every stage. The word person included the child in the womb. The Ohio legislature, for instance, which voted to ratify the 14th Amendment, went so far as to call abortion child murder. They knew the truth. Senator Jacob Howard of Michigan, one of the amendment's authors, one of the authors of the 14th Amendment, said its purpose was to protect, even, quote, "the lowest and most despised of the human race." That is the heart of equal protection. Regardless of your opinions, your beliefs, your feelings, your inconveniences about another human's existence, no one has the right to take their life. Even Justice Harry Blackmun, who wrote the majority opinion in Roe v. Wade, admitted that if the personhood of the unborn could be established, the case for abortion collapses. And science, let's talk about the science. Science leaves no room for doubt. It doesn't matter your religious beliefs or your lack of religious beliefs. The science is clear. Science affirms that human life begins at fertilization. From the moment of conception, a new, unique, and whole human being exists. This is not a matter of an opinion, but of observable fact. Dr. Keith Moore, world-renowned embryologist and professor of anatomy at the University of Toronto, writes in his book, The Developing Human, Clinically Oriented Embryology, quote, "A zygote, a fertilized egg, is the beginning of a new human being." Peter Singer a very pro-abortion philosopher who even supports abortion in the first few months of an infant's life if they have a disability, aka infanticide. He says, from Princeton University, he says, quote, "There is no doubt from the first moments of its existence, an embryo conceived from human sperm and eggs is in fact a human being." And another embryology textbook explains, Human Embryology and Teratology by Ronan O'Reilly and Fabiola Mueller, fertilization is a critical landmark because under ordinary circumstances, a new genetically distinct human organism is formed when the chromosomes of the male and the female pronuclei blend in the oocyte. And one more for you. Dr. Micheline Matthews Roth, a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. Sorry, guys. It is scientifically correct to say that human life begins at conception. And so what do we know of this human life? At 22 days from fertilization, the early stage embryo's heart is beating. At 6 weeks from fertilization, early brain waves can be measured. At 9 weeks, the child can suck her thumb, swallow, and stretch. And by 20 weeks from fertilization, with medical help, babies can survive outside of the womb, and the viability keeps moving earlier and earlier. Every human life is a human person, and equal protection must apply to all, or our laws are discriminatory and unjust. History is full of moments when humanity was denied and the consequences were catastrophic. And in every case, the humanity that is denying the rights or the value to the other has more power. They have more strength. They have more ability to dominate. The Nazis called Jews Untermenschen or subhuman. Der Untermensch, a 1942 pamphlet ordered by high-ranking Nazi Heinrich Himmler, described Jewish and Slavic people as morally degenerate, uncivilized, subhuman. Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels decried Jewish-led international subhumans and their threat to his German culture. This wasn't just rhetoric. This was the logical prelude to mass genocide. The Nazis had an official policy that Jews, the disabled, and others were considered life unworthy of life. And as we know, over 6 million were exterminated in the Holocaust. Today, ongoing dehumanization exists not only of our unborn here, but of children across the world, including places like Israel and Gaza. In 1860, over 3.9 million African Americans were enslaved in this country. Entire families, men, women, and children were treated as property, not people. The Supreme Court of our country, in Dred Scott v. Sanford decision of 1857, said that black men and women were, quote, so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. That judicial lie about their humanity paved the way for brutal oppression. Frederick Douglass, who escaped slavery, exposed its evil with this piercing clarity. He says, quote, the slaveholder, in order to justify himself, and by the way, his justifications include his economic rights, his ultimately his convenience, his property. In order to justify himself, quote, must prove the slave to be a brute. He must deny him intelligence and rationality and dispose of him as a beast. Douglass tells us the soul of the injustice. When you strip a class of people of their humanity, you open the door to every kind of violence. Since 1973, the reason I'm here today, the reason I have been advocating and debating people like Ms. Kissling and others and working to expose the truth on abortion, over 63 million children in the United States alone have been killed by abortion, have been denied their humanity, their value, their choice, have not been given a chance. The pattern has always been the same. Strip away the personhood, redefine human beings as something that is less than, and then commit atrocities in the name of someone else's progress. Abortion is the latest injustice, and it follows the same dark logic. Now, Ms. Kissling spoke of women. She spoke of the importance of women. This was a reference multiple times in her opening remarks. I think she was getting to this point about bodily autonomy, although she didn't state it directly, but I do think bodily autonomy matters. I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I have 3 children of my own. I know what it is to carry children, to birth children, and your bodily autonomy as a woman matters. But my bodily autonomy as a woman and another person's bodily autonomy per se as a man does not give us the right to destroy someone else's body. Especially not the bodies of children, especially not the bodies of our most vulnerable children who have no voice. You'll recognize that while we are here, Ms. Kissling and I, both women speaking, there's someone here who is not represented in the room because they cannot be. Children who have no voice. A newborn child can only cry. An unborn child, you can't even hear them. They are completely silent. For many of them, their vocal cords are not even developed yet. And so it is so easy for the strong to dominate the weak in the name of our own pursuits, our own values, our own ideals, and to forget their value. But they have value. All humans have value. All humans have equal value. And they all deserve to be protected and cared for. It was indicated by Ms. Kissling that in some way she seemed to suggest that because there wasn't a direct argument made for abortion by Ms. Kissling, I have to acknowledge that. She sort of made ancillary comments and statements and sort of indicated that pregnancy was something men wouldn't want to have because it, perhaps is so burdensome to women, it's so unique to women. And there was a lot of comments that she made. But this idea that I would like to address, that somehow that a woman's, her objectives, her empowerment, her rights have to be at odds with a child's. I want to fully and wholeheartedly reject that notion. True women's empowerment cannot come through the bloodshed of our children. You look at countries, this bears out too, when you look at countries that have a philosophy in their healthcare systems of providing the best possible care for both mom and baby. Because I think our maternal mortality rates in this country, where abortion is very accessible. I'm in California. It's available through all 9 months of pregnancy. The child has no rights in California. Our maternal mortality rates in much of the United States are abysmal. And you look at countries that have restricted abortions. You look at Ireland as an example. Before it allowed abortion in just the last few years, it had one of the lowest maternal mortality rates in the world. Chile, abortion restrictions, very significant, some of the lowest maternal mortality rates in the world. You see, it is possible in healthcare to care for both, to treat both as patients. And that is true healthcare based on justice, based on a shared valuing of both child and woman. And that is what we should strive for in this country. The Dublin Declaration is a statement made by thousands globally. Because I also, like Ms. Kissling, have traveled the world. I've had the opportunity to speak with activists, advocates, hear the stories from people across the globe. And the Dublin Declaration is a representation of the thousands of medical professionals from across the globe. And it says specifically that it is never medically necessary to take a child's life via direct and intentional abortion in order to care for a woman. Abortion, the direct and intentional killing of a child, is never medically necessary. I want to quote Dr. Anthony Levatino, a former abortionist, now a pro-life advocate, a friend of mine. Dr. Anthony Levatino, who committed thousands of abortions, he also ran his own abortion practice. One day, his daughter, he and his wife wanted very much to have children. They were able to adopt a little girl. They were thrilled. And one day, he was having a dinner party at his home. The children were playing in the front, and his daughter was killed by a vehicle that ran off the road. And he tells a story very movingly. He went back to his abortion practice the next day or week after the horrific and tragic passing of his little girl. And he said for the first time as he was removing the leg, you see in most late first and second trimester abortions, you have to do dismemberment. and you have to remove the baby piecemeal. And as he was removing a leg off of a child that he was dismembering alive, these are live dismemberment abortions, he pulled this leg out and he looked at his child's leg. And he said, all I could think was of someone else's son or daughter. All I could think that this was someone's son or daughter. He was so moved to be having this moment to see the humanity of these people, these humans that he had been destroying for money, that he decided to leave his practice. He would later go on to explain that when he became a life-saving doctor and worked with high-risk pregnancies to save lives, he said, in my career, I have saved thousands of women's lives by delivering their babies. But when people ask me how many I saved by performing an abortion, this was after he rejected that practice, I tell them that the number is 0. He worked in Upper New York in a high-risk pregnancy clinic, working only with high-risk pregnancies. These are the cases that are often used to justify elective abortion. You need to have an abortion because you have a high-risk situation. There's life-threatening issues. And he's saying with proper medical care, which is what women deserve, you do not need to kill the baby. You care for both. I think one of the other things I want to address that was indicated by Ms. Kissling was this idea of a woman's ability to make decisions for herself, which I highly value, and I'm sure all the women in the room do too. We highly value this, of course. And the indication by Ms. Kissling seemed to be that because she values, as do I, a woman's ability to make decisions, to think, to have autonomy, to move out in the world and to pursue something better for ourselves, that because of that, we somehow need abortion. We somehow need the ending of innocent life. And she was saying that from the standpoint of the woman has consciousness. The woman has the ability to think, the ability to move about and make these decisions. And so the argument seemed to be that because the child doesn't have consciousness, because the child doesn't have the ability to move about in the world and make his or her own decisions yet, it is okay. In some circumstances, completely up to the woman. She completely decides. She holds the keys. She can end the life of the child at will. It is interesting that we do not, and I would guess that Ms. Kissling would not extend this to a newborn baby. And yet a newborn baby, just like the unborn baby, has no ability to reason or think the way that adult woman does, has no way to work about and move out in the world and make their own decisions. They are 100% dependent on their mother. But their dependency doesn't mean they don't have humanity and value and rights. And similarly, for the very same reason that it is wrong to kill a born child, a born child, this newborn, for the very same reason it would be wrong to kill a newborn. And I would hope Ms. Kissling would agree. We'll discuss this, I'm sure, in our conversation. It is wrong to kill an unborn child. And people say, well, the woman, when she's pregnant, she can't just pass off care. A newborn, you can drop the child off at even a fire station, a safe haven box. You can relinquish your care and leave. But even in that case, the woman still has a responsibility to provide safe passage for that child. And the father, too. He can also be charged with criminal neglect of a child as well, and they should be as well if there's criminal neglect. Parents have a responsibility for children. Every single one of us have benefited by this reality. The human race could not go on without this reality being a principle of any civilization, that parents have responsibility to their children. Even if those children are inconvenient to them, even if they're seen as unwanted, parents still have a responsibility. And so I want to respond to one more thing Ms. Kissling indicated towards the end. Men, they can't get pregnant. She made brought us along to see that point very clearly, of course. And would they want to get pregnant? I believe men have responsibility, as women do, for the care of, yes, unborn children, and they should pay child support starting at the beginning of pregnancy. And I think in our country, instead of turning to the violence of abortion as a solution for women, saying, oh, you are in a tough times, you're financially struggling, there is difficulties that you're facing, therefore go have an abortion, practice your choice. Instead of turning to violence against the most vulnerable as a solution to problems that we may face, instead, we should be a society that uplifts the vulnerable, that makes life better for the vulnerable, that focuses our energy and our efforts and our organizations and our resources on supporting women and young families and children, That needs to be the future of this country for our country to survive. I'm proud of the pro-life movement for the thousands of pregnancy resource centers that exist, that are growing. There's more of them than abortion clinics. I think that there should be more federal funding to support young families, like child cash credits. The future is family. The future is children. Children are our future. And so for us to have this future, and I believe the whole purpose of this debate, society, is to talk about what does the future look like? How do we make a better future? How do we make a more just and loving future? How do we do that? We can't do that on the broken bodies of children. Any child. We cannot do that. The future must be life first. That is the only way forward for a nation that cherishes justice. It is the only path forward. Life has to come first. And so I ask you tonight to stand with children. Stand with the preborn, the most vulnerable among us, who cannot vote, who cannot speak, who cannot defend themselves. They need you. Women and men, they need us. They need our voice, our courage, and our love. Choose love, not violence. Thank you.
I have it on. Okay. How many questions are we going to do?
For 5 minutes, and I'll give you.
Total period is 5. And I could ask as many questions as I wanted. Okay, fine. Question. What are we going to do about this? The reality is, abortions are happening. On, and I'm going to scream better, much better. I can do it. I know. But you're going to give me a real microphone. Good. Let's say, is this on? I don't think it's on. No, that's. I think this is fine. I think mine is. Okay. Loud. Okay. So you have presented a very serious problem: the number of abortions that is happening, and the traumas that result from those abortions. What do you think? The first question would be: should we put those women in jail? I mean, seriously, I'm not fooling around. I'm not going to ask that.
Sure.
I mean, if there are women out, if there are women and men and doctors who are performing abortions or having abortions, and this is a horrendous act on their parts, they're killing babies. What do we do?
I think we should absolutely criminalize abortion. I think abortion providers, it should be censored. Can you hear me? I think that we should absolutely criminalize abortion.
Uh-huh.
And
For who?
abortion, anybody who provides abortion should be held.
Only providers? What about the women?
I think that in some cases, yes, if there's, I mean, think about infanticide.
What cases?
Do you think we should criminalize infanticide? Let me ask you that.
I'm not. Okay.
I think that, yes, abortion should be criminalized for those that intentionally and willfully pursue it. The end of the life thing, and they have full knowledge, there's no coercion, yes.
Okay. So that you think that's what we should do. Is there anything else we should be doing?
You mean in terms of criminalization or?
No, anything else.
Well, as I said in my
That's your question.
Thank you. As I said in my comments, I think there's a lot that we should be doing. I indicated some of the things. I think there should be better cash credits for parents starting at before birth from the government. I think that there should be more support for pregnancy resource centers and federally qualified centers that don't provide abortions. I think that birth should be free. I don't think birth should cost anything. I think birth should be free. And I think that child support should start in the womb. It should not start at birth. It should start in the womb.
So now, okay.
I'm trying not to ask questions myself. I'll be quiet and wait my turn.
Right, you can do it when it's your turn. So what about, I had a question here I wanted to ask you, and it slipped my mind, but it will come to me in a second. What are you aware? Okay, I mean, one of the things you are an expert in is having visited clinics, seeing things that go on in clinics that perform abortion that are wrong, that are inappropriate. Are you at all aware of what goes on in pregnancy counseling centers of similar nature? Because if you're not, I'll tell you. So maybe you should tell me what they're doing. I have to tell you.
Well, I'm privileged to have volunteered at many pregnancy resource centers over the years. Financially,
I can't believe it. I can't hear you.
Okay,
Come on, folks. You know this is.
I'll try to speak louder. I'm privileged to have volunteered, Ms. Kissling, at many pregnancy resource centers over the years. My husband and I are blessed to be able to financially support pregnancy resource centers. We help fundraise for pregnancy resource centers, and I'm extremely proud of the work that is done. These are nonprofits that don't receive any government funds. They are run without any financial incentive for the people running them. It's completely charitable work. I did not say they were perfect, Ms. Kissling. No human is perfect, and no organization is perfect.
What you know about what? Because I can tell you, and then maybe you go and you can investigate them. What about the clinics?
Let's say this. At pregnancy resource centers, there are children that are not being dismembered alive as they are at abortion clinics. At pregnancy resource centers, there are resources being offered pregnant mothers that are not being offered at Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics across the country.
I'm with you.
And at pregnancy resource centers, there's free and confidential support and adoption referrals that are being offered that are not being done at Planned Parenthood.
So you have never heard.
And by the way, Planned Parenthood, one more thing, Planned Parenthood has been receiving until just 2 months ago, thank goodness, they've been receiving $500 million a year in taxpayer money
You understand
to do that.
that this is a way of avoiding the question. Instead of answering the question, what you do is you talk about what somebody else is doing that is wrong. Now, have you ever heard of I've looked at some.
What question am I not answering? I take that seriously.
Are you pregnancy counseling centers that are opposed to abortion who do anything inappropriate in their clinics? For example, I will give you an example. Tell a woman that her weeks of pregnancy are further along than would be eligible for her to get an abortion. Okay.
Answer. May I answer?
You can answer.
Okay. Thank you for asking the question directly. I really appreciate that. So, yes, there are. I am sure that in the world of the nonprofit space of pregnancy resource centers, there have been mistakes that have been made because that is human. Yeah, I'm sure there are mistakes that have been made. But again, these are resource centers that are giving away hundreds of millions of dollars in free support to low-income women. That's who you're fighting against, Ms. Kissling. That's what they're doing. And I think they deserve our respect and our support. Thank you. Ms. Kissling, you talked about the value of women and you didn't use the word rights, but you talked about their abilities to make decisions and choice. I mean, the resolution is choice versus life. Do you think that children in the womb have any value?
Yes, I think that they do.
How so?
I think that all life has value, and it would be inappropriate of me to say that suddenly fetal life has no value. What that value is complicated. They have the value of being. They exist. That is enough to give them value.
What about the newborn? Would you say that the newborn child, because it has less autonomy and less consciousness, has less value in your worldview than the adult woman who has her full faculties, maybe an education and everything else?
No.
No. And why is that?
Because it's born.
So you're attaching the value to birth, not to consciousness.
I think that in some instances, yes.
Why? Why is birth The defined
No,
will
why is
value.
consciousness would be the appropriate.
Well, you just seem to indicate that because the newborn, in your view, has the same value as the fully conscious adult woman, they're the same, though.
There are things that can be done for a newborn who is no longer in the body of a woman that cannot be done for that entity, that fetus, that embryo, which is inside her body. There is that in and of itself is an important distinction. Location.
So would it be your position then that because the baby in an unborn baby's situation, of course, they're in the body of their mother, that the mother then should have the, I know you'd like the word right, but should be permitted to, at any juncture, at will, have an abortion?
At any stage of pregnancy.
Yeah, because
No.
they're in the womb. But
No,
understand
I'm
that
perfectly happy, for example, that the framework that originally was developed in Roe v. Wade. The framework was very simple. It was in the first trimester, a woman can make the decision for any and no reason. In the second trimester, she could still make the second trimester. The Roe law said that those decisions need to be part with the health and needs work against the work
Why do you agree with that?
would be terminated for any reason. Health needed the third trimester, and there's a debate about what it meant. In the third trimester, the only reason abortions could be performed were to save the woman's life or her health. And the movement for choice is split.
And do you agree with that framework?
I think
Your
that framework works.
That's your framework. So then in the case of those second trimester abortions, in your view, you're saying that those abortions should be permitted provided there are certain things taken into account. The woman meets a certain threshold, in your view.
Correct.
So what is the difference between an embryo toward the end of that first trimester, 11, 12, going into 13 weeks, and a embryo turning into a fetus at the beginning of the second trimester? What, in your view, is the moral difference that in one case it should be not permitted to kill the baby, and in the other case, for any reason you stated, it should be permitted?
The only difference
Why is
that I can actually I that
so
I think people can
disagree. So just to be clear, so by that standard, it sounds like you're saying, if I understand you correctly, that developmental abilities confer more value or rights, legal protection.
Oh, right.
Okay, well, not use that word. I know it's not a good word for you. Protection, more legal protections. That more developmental abilities for the unborn child confers gradually more legal protection. Should this be the case for humans at all different levels of ability? So should the newborn child have less legal protections than the adult man? Why? But that doesn't follow your original standard. You're changing the standard. You're changing the standard.
Relate the location of the fetus or unborn child. That must always be part of the consideration. Once the fetus is born, the woman, it's no longer in her body. The woman has no need for those protections.
Are we last time? All right. Thank you, my friends, for this wonderful evening. Thank you, Ms. Kissling, for being my debate opponent this evening, and for everyone who shared their remarks and their questions. To be human should be enough. To be human should guarantee you value in a human society and should guarantee you the same fundamental legal protections as other humans in a society. And in our society, we are governed by a constitution that has a 14th Amendment, which declares equal protection under the law for all, not for some, but for all. And has been discussed this evening, some of the greatest human rights abuses have been perpetuated because of the dehumanization that has been pushed on certain groups of people who are seen as subhuman or less than. And any time we draw a standard, to draw a line, to say you are less than human because of your abilities, because of your skin color, because of your beliefs, because of your age, because of any distinction, we open the door, we commit great abuses. Our society can only stand if we acknowledge fundamental realities about what the human person is, who the human person is, and the rights that they deserve, the legal protections that they deserve. This evening, there have been largely two categories of arguments on behalf of choice. And by the way, the resolution has, I believe, a problem in how it's framed, in that there is no choice for the child. So if you argue for choice, you are arguing against a lifetime of choices for that child. A lifetime of choices for the child. But the two categories, one has been consciousness. But it has been made clear that there are humans that have little to no consciousness. Maybe they are in a coma, or it is baby Jax, who only has a brainstem. And yet it is never right to intentionally take Jack's life. And so then the argument moves to dependency. Well, Jax can be protected even though he lacks most of his brain function. He lacks largely consciousness. Jax should be protected, but only because he's born, right? This is the argument from the side promoting abortion on demand. And so dependency becomes a standard. The child is dependent in and upon the mother. The child needs the mother. But this standard also falls apart, because the reality is we are all dependent in one way or another. And at birth, we are as dependent as before birth. Without nurture, without care, without nourishment, we will die on our own as newborns. And yet we provide, and it seems even the choice side is providing full care for the newborn, full legal protection for the newborn, and yet no legal protection for the child before birth at certain arbitrary standards. And yet the only difference between those children are their level of development and the degree of dependency. But the newborn is dependent. And I have a responsibility as a parent. Both men and women have responsibilities to their children, whether they feel inconvenienced or not, whether they feel burdened or not. This is the social contract that we must live by if we're going to have justice in this country, that there is a responsibility that the strong have to the weak, and that it is never acceptable to take the life of someone who is weak and dependent. It is never acceptable to take the life of an innocent human being. The choice before us is clear. I believe that if we continue to permit the violence against our most vulnerable, unborn children who have no way to advocate for themselves, protect themselves, if we continue to permit the bloodshed of almost 3,000 deaths every single day, boys and girls, just like us, whose lives were cut short, our nation will continue to devolve into violence and into injustice. If we want a brighter future, if we want justice, if we not only want life, but a lifetime of choices, we must not pit the woman against the child. And we must give the child the same rights and the same protection that all of us have enjoyed. Imagine with me this country if instead of applying our focus on whether or not we can kill the child, we instead discuss how we can help the child and the parents and build stronger families and a better society and culture. Imagine if that was the conversation of the evening. We must get away from the injustice of violence against the vulnerable and the weak and move instead towards a future that sees every human person as valuable, as promised equal protection under the law, and as worth fighting for. Imagine what the brilliant minds of Yale could come up with to form a stronger social contract, a better system for how we care for our very young, for how we care for women, for how we provide health care. Imagine the world that we could create together. Thank you so much.
So I'm thinking about this question or this belief that every human life is of equal value. And the fact that for some of us, we focus the specificity of that point on fetuses. Okay? It's focus, not a bad thing, but the reality of the world in which we live in, throughout the world, through Gaza, through the Ukraine, and onward relative to that, is that every human life does not have equal value. It should it have equal value? Yes, in a way, it should. But then you get into philosophy, and you get into thought experiments. A little bit into a thought experiment, and I'll close with that. There's a fire in a building, and you can only save one person. You need only time to save one person. In one room, you can save a few people, alter it a little bit. In one room, there's a poor family of 6 people. Never had anything in their lives, never have been cared for, have not had good education for their children, etc. And across the apartment, across the building, in another apartment, this is not a new experiment. I mean, it happens all the time, and it happens in real life. There's a doctor, one white guy doctor, who is, everyone knows this doctor that both families are white. I'll do that much. Okay. Everybody knows, because I don't want to make it so obvious. Everybody knows that this doctor is 3 weeks away of a cure for cancer. All kinds of cancer. Now, of course, it's all too much, but I'm asking you to think for yourself about how much you really believe, and how much you act, and how much all our governments act within the principle of every single life. I'm going to include all the little baby fetuses too. Every single life has the same value as the other life. And I'll give you one more little, and you believe greatest good for the greatest number of people. Good principle. Greatest good for the greatest number of the people. Do you only will save the family a bit, or do you save the dog? That's it.
Thank you, Frances.
And with that, is there an appropriate motion? For the motion. For the motion, President. I move that we thank the guests.